So I have been doing intermittent fasting now for about 2 years. Right after COVID, I ballooned up to, must have been around 215, 220 pounds, and I'm 5'10" and a half. So I was way overweight for me. And it wasn't muscle weight, right? It was just, I was overeating.
Right.
I started intermittent fasting and my weight started coming down to the point now where I'm able also to go about a full day. I'll do OMAD fast. What's the difference between, intermittent fasting, which a lot of the kind of monastic traditions, they're doing almost daily, right? A type of intermittent fasting. But that has kind of become a trend now. People are doing intermittent fasting or keto diet. What's the difference with those two and the Athos diet that you're putting kind of an emphasis on? Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith.
Well, speaking the intermittent fasting point, and again, these are all just terms that we play with, but no matter, the tradition persists, for over 1,000, or I would say based on writings that I found of the various fathers, at least 1,700 years. The 300s, the 200s, you can see writings from the Holy Fathers, the ancient fathers, about ways to eat, breaking your fast, what it means to pursue a Christian fast. And I've tried to pull all of these things together. And again, one of the reasons I go back to Athos over and over again is that they also have been pulling from those traditions from the early church and living them. But this is the cool thing. And this is why I feel like oftentimes you can't start at like a scientific tool perspective. It's just, there's no beauty in that. There's no inspiration in that. I can give you all the biohacks in the world, but if we start with something that's beautiful, good, and true, maybe something emerges from that. So the reason I bring this up is to say this. The monks of Mount Athos every day are challenged with the opportunity, and it's a challenge, to take communion every day, ideally. So that means that at the end of liturgy, they have the body and blood of Christ. And the reason that's so important, of course, is because through that, they seek salvation, kind of like a reset every day. And many people will say that when you fall asleep at night, it's like a miniature death. When you wake up in the morning, it's like a miniature resurrection. And in the process of getting ready for communion, you're supposed to have confession. You're supposed to forgive others. You're supposed to ask forgiveness. You're supposed to solve issues. And so if indeed once you're done eating the day before and you go to sleep with this perspective of this miniature death and this miniature resurrection in the morning, and you're preparing for salvation, which then comes to a climax with communion, then when they say, this is my body and blood for the remission of sins, for the healing of both soul and body, it's literal. And what I've done through science, or through what our understanding of science right now, is that when you essentially eat like a monk and you're eating late in the afternoon and then don't eat until the very next late morning, you're essentially not eating for about 16 hours a day, which is intermittent fasting. Right. And when any mammalian species intermittent fasts, it lives 30 to 40% longer. So it's just incredible that what comes with the territory of this discipline and this emphasis is something in the pudding, something in the process that comes with the territory, something so life-changing and life-saving. And, there are many examples of that through history where if we trust and have faith in God's commandments and what the right thing is to do, we're taken care of. And in this case, it's very dramatic and very apparent. But, it's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing that what is intermittent fasting called today is essentially what the monks would call getting ready for death, and getting ready and seeking salvation. And what comes with it is this incredible salve to suffering. And it's such a meek Christian phenomenon. The meek shall inherit the earth. Like, here's something so simple and so silent and so peaceful. And with that emphasis, all sorts of goodness emerges. But it comes with the territory. I think it'd be very difficult to kind of pursue this biohack for the sake of, and not link it to something so metaphysical. And now I have the inspiration to do this every day. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's like poetry.
Wow. What would you say to someone who is maybe a lot more conservative and would maybe criticize the commercialization of this kind of monastic practice, so to speak, and say, hey, we can't bring that out to everybody. This is for Mount Athos.
That's great. I mean, like I said, it is Christian fasting done right. And Christian fasting done right is three things. It's intermittent fasting, where you're not eating for 16 hours, maybe even 20 hours a day. it's eating plant-based food, and it's cycling through that plant-based food diet throughout the year, depending on the liturgical cycle of the year. So for right now, we're entering Great Lent. That's about 48 days till Easter. So we're going to do a very intensive fast that includes plant-based food and intermittent fasting. And then when it comes to activity, it's essentially walking. But my call to the 1.5 billion or maybe 2 billion Christians out there is, if we want to outlive our enemies, if we want to sidestep 90% of all disease, if you want to be there for your great grandchildren, if you want to live a life where you're not only just 90, but you're also still alert and clear and can give the wisdom that you learned through your life to the next generation, it's time to fast. I don't think it's optional. And we've had, let's call it a 70 or 80 year experiment. Let's call it a 100-year experiment where we could kind of forget all the old traditions and kind of lean on our Western medicine, but it's catching up to us. America's $37 trillion in debt. We can't afford to take care of our elderly anymore. And I'm in the ER right now telling you that there is a tidal wave of tragedy coming our way because we cannot sustain the newest baby boomers who are overwhelming our healthcare system given their lifetime of bad eating habits. And I'm not trying to say that this is all just about like eating more vitamins and exercising more. I'm saying is that what comes with the physical well-being is the spiritual well-being. And, it all comes with the territory. And so I'll say that we can't just treat these things as biohacks. And this Christian fasting is something that was meant for all Christians. It really is God's salve to suffering. And I think that we, to our own peril, self-exile ourselves when we don't pick up our cross and walk. I mean, God constantly tells us, Jesus constantly tells us in the New Testament to pray and fast. And by fasting, oftentimes our prayer becomes even more intense. So you need both, but certainly fasting helps you pray even all the more. And so that's where I feel like we as Christians in the 21st century need to stop looking at fasting as some type of storybook kind of kumbaya thing that you do for fun or you do as an offering to God, which it is, but it also has huge implications to your life and really society. What would a world look like if everyone fasted like they're supposed to? I mean, we spend $5 trillion a year on disease in America alone. If I can get rid of 80 to 90% of that through fasting, that's a game changer. That's a game changer.
Man, that's wild. I mean, I experienced it myself going through intermittent fasting, and then eventually doing one-day fast. I love your passion about this. You're clearly very knowledgeable about this. You're right there in the front lines, and you've done a lot of research on this. What about the scientific evidence that's supporting this is effective for someone's longevity? Obviously, someone's spirituality is harder to measure, but any scientific evidence that you ran across?
Well, I will first start with sort of saying, hey, what is our core? And I think in the Western world, in the modern day, we think to ourselves, oh, it's definitely our brain. And certainly there's a lot going on there. But what's also sometimes minimized and completely looked over is the enteric nervous system, which lines our 30 feet of intestine, which is pretty much ever as complex as our brain.